Oh, well, hello everyone to this webinar. Hello, welcome to the webinar about how humans really think and what this means for business. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is David Papa, and I want to thank DCG Speakers Bureau for hosting this webinar and getting this message out in front of everyone. I hope that today you learned something useful that you can start using as soon as tomorrow. Based on how humans really think. Um, I would love that. Hold on one second. I'm just going to adjust the setting here. There's evidently some crazy delay that I have to deal with. Okay. So this is my first attempt at a webinar. I apologize for any technical difficulties. Earlier today, my head was squished in the camera, so I'm really glad to see that my head is not squished. Also, I was hoping we could have some interaction. I didn't want to talk for 30 minutes about how humans really think and what this means for business. I wanted some questions. If you go to the live stream in YouTube, you should be able to ask for type comments, and I can try to look at those, and we can see, get some questions, some interaction going, because that'd be great. I don't want to just sit here and talk for 30 minutes, although if I have to, that's what I'm going to do. And hopefully I will entertain you as well as inform you, and you can tell me what you think on the DCG Speakers website. Okay, or in the YouTube comments. So how do humans really think? And you might think that this is a very psychological discussion, and it is, but there's something even more important than the psychology. Well, it's actually the source of the psychology, and that is our biology. So let's think about our biology for a second. We evolved in a, I'm going to back up and I'm going to give you more. I got to use my hand, get my hands involved. I'm half Italian, so my hands, they need to help you learn. So our biology comes from millions and millions of years of evolution. Well, what does that mean? That means we're designed to survive. Okay, and look at, in particular, the human species. All of our organs, everything about us is designed for survival, designed to keep us alive, help us procreate. And one of the ways that humans do that is by forming tribes. Tribes keep us safe. Tribes help us share resources. We learned a long time ago, well before we were actually humans as a species, that tribes make a lot of sense for us. So what that means is we have millions and millions of years of evolution in our brains, in our bodies, about that help us survive, in particular, a tribal situation. So let's think about survival. What does the brain do to help you survive? How does the brain, the survival part of your brain, I'm talking about the brain stem down in the back. A lot of people call it the reptilian part of the brain. There's three parts of the brains we'll talk about today. One is neocortex, kind of in the front area, on the top area, and then there is the amygdala, which is in the middle and attaches to the base of the brain stem. And this area is really good for how we get emotions. So the emotion section, it is different than the thinking section and the logic section. The emotion section and the logic and language section, those are actually different sections of the brain. It's actually one reason it's hard to talk about your emotions sometimes. Because you have to try to find the words, making that brain translation sometimes difficult. But we're going to talk more about emotions later. And then there's that third part of the brain attached to the amygdala down there in your brainstem. And that is the reptilian brain. That is your survival, all your survival functions. That's like fight or flight response. If you're in a dangerous situation, what do? Do you run? Do you stay? Do you fight? So this, how does this brain, your brain is just a survival organ. That's what it is. It's a survival organ. And on top of those survival mechanisms, we have the ability to think and reason and logic and be creative and do all kinds of amazing things. It is an amazing survival organ. And all those extra features allowed us to thrive as humans along the way. But in particular, there's something your brain does to help you survive, to help you stay away from danger, and to help you avoid pain, avoid things that damage your body. And the way your brain does that, your survival center of your brain, is it gives you fear. And so you feel you are scared. to do certain things. If you've burnt a pan, you burnt your hand on a pan and in the past, and now your brain knows that hot pans are dangerous, and a hot pan falls or comes near your hand, or your hand, there's this flash of fear. There's a lot of instinctual situations that bring us fear, like if we're getting attacked, things that are built into our evolution, our genetics, but also things we learn in our life that our brain associates with a negative experience. Now our brain wants to give us fear when we're approaching that experience, because that's how our brain keeps us alive. That's how our brain helps the organism survive, so the organism can procreate. Fear is constantly being pumped out of your brain to get you to not do things or cause you to do certain things that you might not otherwise do. And what is of particular interest for business is this tribal element that we talked about. Because when you're growing up in a tribe, you need your tribe to survive. You need your tribe to feed you. You need your tribe to shelter you. You need your tribe to help you hunt. Your tribe is extremely important to your well-being as a human. So over time, our brain tied the survival to the tribe. So now, anytime you think you might do something that may cause a rejection by the tribe, that may lower your standing in the tribe, that may lower your ability to interact with members of the tribe, you're getting a fear response. Your brain is going to send you a fear response saying, hold on, wait a minute. We don't want to get rejected. We don't want to get rejected by the tribe, because rejection means death. Rejection means death to an evolutionary organism that requires a tribe for survival. So how does this play out in our daily lives? It's happening to us all the time. For example, you might not speak up about an idea that you have because you're worried about the reaction of the other people at work. Maybe you're worried about your boss's reaction. Okay, your boss has some hierarchy over you in a typical company, right? So that means that they're kind of like a tribal leader, compared to you. They have higher status than you. So if you do something where they might reject you, might lower your status, that actually is a very fearful situation for the brain. And the average person finds it very difficult to tell their boss something they know their boss is going to have a negative reaction to, especially it's something that person cares about, that it's a reflection on that individual and their own self. Think about how all the people who hide mistakes, all the people who don't want to deliver bad news, all the people who won't want to rock the boat. A lot of that is about the fear that we have from stepping outside the tribe. Now remember, this is not a bad thing in just objectively. It's not objectively bad because it's actually helped us survive for millions of years, and it comes in it's very useful as well in certain situations where maybe it'll stop you from doing something bad. Maybe you want to harm somebody, but you won't, because the fear of the reaction from the tribe keeps you in check. So maybe there's some positive things. Maybe we get a lot more coworkers stabbing each other with pencils if we didn't have this fear problem, or this fear reaction. But it also stops you from doing a lot of things that are very authentic to who you are, because your fear is worrying about the tribal reaction and the reaction of your leaders, the reaction of people around you. Authenticity is a huge thing for me. My work is called Love and Profit. What I'm trying to do is bring more love into the business world, because so many of our decisions are run by fear. So many of our decisions are run by this fear-based process inside of us, in our lives, and especially in business. Think about all the companies that don't want to make a long-term decision that might be good for the company. Like take a brand in a new direction, where for the first 6 to 12 months, it's kind of it'll be an experimental thing. So it's not really guaranteed to have not guaranteed to be very profitable. How many companies won't do that because of the short-term profit hits they need to keep having? How many leaders, won't take a risk, even because they're worried about their own status. A good calculated risk that might be good for the company or for their team. How many leaders are terrible at giving feedback? Most of that has to do with one of two things: they're never trained to do it, or their training consisted of other leaders who gave them horrible feedback, or they're scared of the reaction to give really, constructive feedback to the person that's in front of them. They're scared of how someone's going to react. It's an unpredictable situation, and they can't help but have the brain circuitry telling them this is very scary. So we have all this fear going on in our lives, in our world. We have all this fear happening every day in our decisions. And one of my hopeful takeaways for you today is that once we get through this conversation, you'll be able to go look at the decisions you're making every day and find out which ones are based on fear, because all of us do them. I spent a large portion of my life making many decisions and doing many activities based on the approval of other people, based on what I thought other people would think, both in my personal life and in my business life. It's not it's something we just need to be aware is going on. And as I said, it's not something we totally want to get rid of either, because caring about what other people think has a lot of positive outcomes. We just need to be aware when we're being run by the fear circuitry that's at the base of our brain. So why is it so powerful? Why is this fear circuitry? Why can't we just constantly override it with our reason and our logic? People have many fears that that are totally irrational. I mean, fear is not rational. It's an emotion. It's by definition irrational. Why is that so powerful? Well, it's because that part of our brain is the oldest part of our brain, and that part of our brain evolved first. That survival part of our brain we share with almost any other animal that has a brain. And the higher part of our brain, the next part to develop is the emotional part of our brain. That part of our brain we share with all mammals, dogs, cats. You can see that they react to human emotions and they have emotions themselves. Okay, pigs, cows, all mammals have the emotional part of the brain in varying ratios to brain size. And then the final part of our brain, in evolutionary terms, that evolved is the reason and logic part of our brain, the neocortex, right? So that means our emotional part of our brain and our survival part of our brain has had basically almost a 500 million year head start in terms of its integration into our whole body, compared with the reason and logic part of our brain. Okay, so it is so much more powerful in terms of motivating our action. In fact, the logical part of your brain, the reason part of your brain, can process around 40 pieces of information per second. That sounds really good. That sounds like more than most of us are even conscious of. Like what am I seeing? What am I hearing? How is it? What am I working on? What am I saying? How's the person in front of me reacting? What am I sensing on my body? Like how do my clothes feel when I move? All these things. Can be 40 pieces of information, whatever they are, from the environment and the world, are coming in through our neocortex. I apologize if you hear some construction sounds, by the way. Just so happens exactly when I started recording, someone is putting up scaffolding outside. That's a perfect scenario for this webinar. Hopefully this metal smashes that you will hear will just be perfect punctuation to my points, and it will enhance your overall experience. So that logical reason part of our brain can handle 40 pieces of information per second. Well, how many do you think the emotional part of our brain can handle? The emotional part of our brain can actually handle around 20 million pieces of information per second. 20 million. By the time your logical brain has come up with an action you should do in the scenario, the deeper parts of your brain have already calculated everything you need to do. In fact, this is how behavior actually works in humans, okay? You encounter a situation. The first part of your brain to look at that situation is the oldest part of your brain, the brainstem, the survival part of your brain. And that part of your brain is looking for threats. It's looking to see if you're safe. It's looking to see if you have to react in a survival situation, in a survival way. It's looking if you have to, run or fight or flight. Once that is clear, it's clear you're not in any danger, then the emotional part of your brain is working. And the emotional part of your brain is trying to figure out how you feel about a situation. Now, think about this. Before we had language, before we had reason, before we had logic as organisms, how did we navigate the world? How did we get impulses inside ourselves to do one thing or another, to chase an animal or not, to mate or not, to communicate with another animal in front of us or not? How do we decide to do that before we had reason, logic, and language? Well, it's because we were getting impulses of emotion, because that emotional part of our brain was present. We would get impulses of desire, like want to go, see a prey, running, attack, we get these emotional impulses that are driving us, just like that fear impulse that still happens when we're in a situation that we think may interrupt our tribal status. Okay. So the emotional part of our brain has fired and taken into account 20 million pieces of information, while the logical brain is just really, and the reasoning brain is just trying to catch up, trying to do whatever it can to catch up. But here's the thing, you have to act. You have to act in the moment. So where does the actual behavior come in? The behavior comes in from the emotional center of the brain. The emotional center of the brain and the survival center of the brain work together to get you to decide what you are going to actually do. And then the reason and logic part of the brain catches up and makes up a really good explanation for why you just took that action. That's actually the order of events in the brain. Think about it. Think about you buy an ice cream, you see the ice cream, you feel this like impulse to get the ice cream. It's an emotional impulse, not a logical impulse, because logically maybe you shouldn't eat that ice cream, but you feel the impulse. So what do most of us do? We just go with that emotional impulse. We buy the ice cream, and then when we're eating it, our logical brain says, you know what? I haven't had ice cream in a while. I hadn't had too much to eat today, so this ice cream is fine. Or maybe that happens right as you're buying the ice cream. That's what your brain says to yourself. You see what's happening there? Your emotions told you to get the ice cream. Your brain decided why it was a good idea. Okay, this happens all the time for so many decisions. Think of brands. Think of a consumer buying a product. Let's rope this back into a business context. So according to the book Biology, which is a study of what actually makes people buy, the conscious part of our brain only explains about 10% of buying purchases. That 90% of our buying decisions are actually made in the subconscious part of the brain, which includes that emotional and survival area. Now, why might that be? Well, that kind of explains the preference people have for certain brands. Like why do brands have an appeal? And we can say like, yeah, there's a status symbol, there's they say something about us, but why does that matter? Why do we need to say some stuff about us all the time? Let's really question, like, why are people asserting their identity all the time? It's because we have this emotional impulse to maintain our status in the tribe. It's because we have this emotional impulse for us to be liked, to be approved of, and to have status, so we can get resources and we can procreate. It's all about the procreation. That's what, and logically, there's no reason why someone would, prefer they're put two equivalent brands two equivalent products next to each other. One has a brand that just slightly someone feels better about. They're going to go with that one. It's an emotional decision. This is why people stand in line for the iPhone when the new iPhone's coming out, compared to walking into the Apple Store a week later and picking it up, no problem, right? It's because emotions are what actually driving our decisions, and the rational brain is making up good reasons why we should buy that iPhone, because it's actually better than the other stuff. Actually, you can use my apps. I actually really enjoy having the latest piece of technology. We find reasons that are completely not nothing to do with these actual underneath very tribal emotional motivators for why people buy things. Okay, and why people want to follow leaders inside of companies as well. Remember the reason why we participate in a tribe, so we can be safe, so we can share resources, so we can get access to the resources we need in procreation. Now, what does that look like in the working world? In the, to come up with a slightly different way to look at it in the working world. But in the working world, people want to feel safe. They want to feel like their jobs are not under threat. They want to feel like they're being taken care of, just like a member of a tribe, that resources are getting shared with them. And maybe not procreation so much, but some form of love, yes. And that at work comes in the form of appreciation, comes in the form of appreciating people and gratitude for actually what they're doing every day. And there's a lot more to engagement, but at the fundamental tribal emotional level, Simon Sinek talks about this in his book, Leaders Eat Last. Almost the whole book is about the biological basis for why we want leaders that make us feel safe and appreciated. It's very tribal. So these underlying emotions are what motivating all our decisions. Okay, I'm going to take a break in a second. Check over to the questions on the YouTube live stream in case you have any of them, and we can try to see if we can incorporate some questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and listening to this stuff. I'd love to get your feedback about what and if this is making sense to you, if any of this is resonating with you, and I want to move now to how we can actually use this information. Really, the psychological principle that explains this, that I've found, I've done a lot of research into different psychological principles, trying to really find one that describes really well these biological tendencies we have that are very clear to see in science and research. For example, we have neurons in our brains called mirror neurons. Literally, their entire job is to see what someone else is doing near us and replicate that process in our brains, so that we can copy and be part of a tribe. Have you ever noticed when two people are talking and they're really hitting it off, how their body language starts to match? Have you ever been in a somewhere where there's accents, and maybe you start to say a few words after being with them for a while? You start to say a few words in an accent like they do, and compared to the normal way you talk. These are your mirror neurons helping you fit in with the tribe that you're a part of. They're trying to help you survive in the tribe. We have special mirror neurons that are just for laughter. We have cells in our brain that when we see someone else laughing, even if we don't know the joke, those neurons want us to laugh. Why? Why would they do that? Because laughing is an amazing bonding experience. Laughing is a way that we connect with other tribe people. Okay, so it's really actually one interesting study I saw said that managers looked at a whole bunch of managers, and the top performing managers. I looked at a bunch of managers and laughter. That's what they studied. They looked at managers and performance, like financial performance, team performance, and they looked at laughter. And they found that the top performing managers made their employees laugh an average of 3 times more. It doesn't mean that, the correlation isn't causation. It doesn't mean that more laughter means more productivity, although maybe that link, will be built. But what it does mean is that the experience of bonding, a safe and enjoyable tribal experience, elevates performance. It elevates performance inside of work, and it elevates it enhances the effectiveness of your products on the consumer market. This is how humans really think. Okay, and those are some of the ways the impacts it has on business. And the psychological theory that I was about to explain to you is called social identity theory. And in researching social identity theory, I found a research paper done by graduate students at the University of California that basically it does an amazing job of explaining almost all of Apple's success based on social identity theory, because what they called it is the making of Apple people. And that is really what's happening from an internal brain human thinking perspective. When we're buying a product, when we're making a decision about how we want to run our life and spend our money, when we're making a decision about how we want to act at work, how we want to react to a leader, or how we want to act as a leader, we're making decisions based on our social identity, our tribal identity. And that's really what's motivating all of us. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the other to the YouTube channel. We'll see if you guys have any comments in there. I don't see any. I'm going to search in one more spot, see if there's any comments in there. Okay, we have a comment. I'm curious why there are still sales organizations who use fear and intimidation, thinking it will improve performance. Why is the sector so slow to change? Okay, that's a great question. That's a great question. Because fear actually does motivate. We've seen that fear can motivate behavior. We've seen that people are acting out of fear. So if you make them terrified, people will act. Although, so in the short term, high levels of fear and stress can make people take actions. In the long term, however, what are you doing to your business? Okay, this is a really good question, Carol. You know, one place that scientists and poets really agree is this quote from Maya Angelou, which is that what people remember about you is how you made them feel. And that's because we have all that emotional wiring. Okay, it's not the logic that's driving our decisions. So people who are using fear-based tactics to manipulate might get the short-term hits, okay? But what is the long-term emotional consequence of that behavior? A leader who's doing that is going to be seen as a fear-monger. No one is going to want to work for that person. So they maybe get the short-term hit, long-term, large turnover in the company. And long-term performance will drop because that fear-based manipulation tactic is going to be less and less effective every time. Okay, and same with consumers. You know, there's a lot of scarcity in sales. Sort of scarcity and finite timeframes in sales is a tactic that many business people have seen to work very well. You know, there's a limited number in stock, and it's 50% off only till tomorrow. You know, buy it now. That gets people to buy. But the emotional consequence of that is now people associate with your brand fear. People associate scarcity with your brand. Whatever you offered them, whatever they bought, had better have created a completely opposite emotional experience so that they leave with a good feeling about your brand. Otherwise, they're going to remember those manipulation tactics. People know when they're being manipulated. People know when they're being manipulated by fear. It has a short-term bump and a very negative long-term consequence. Who wants to be in that situation where they're going to be fearful all the time? Who wants to every time they want to buy something, going to get bombarded by like, act right now. I mean, that pressure, you know, it leaves a very negative feeling over time. So it's a really good question. Thanks for that. We have another question. Overview is really great. What would be your top 2 tips for applying this knowledge to business? Great. That's how I'm going to end this. I really appreciate that question. Thank you very much. So thanks for being here and listening. Thanks for being interested in Love and Profit and DCG Speakers Bureau. So how can we use this? All change starts with yourself. You can't go out there trying to change something in the world if you're not changing your own behavior. It's just not going to work. It's going to fall flat. So the first tip is look in your own business practices, look in your own decisions that your own company is doing internally, externally, that is using fear-based tactics, that is leveraging this powerful pathway of fear to get people to act, and decide if that's really what you want to do. And that's really how you want to run your business. Decide if that really works for you, or if there's another way to go about it. Love and Profit is about that other way. And I really believe that the more of us take another way and stop acting out of fear, we'll be more fulfilled in our own roles. We'll be doing our best work in our own roles, because you can't do your best work when you're scared from the culture or from your leaders. You know, you're scared of what's going to happen. You're scared of losing your job. You're scared of how someone's going to react to you. As a consumer, you don't want to be loyal to a company that keeps you scared. Okay, so we have to start with ourselves. And the first tip is ask yourself, is this a decision I'm making because I'm scared of something? Or is this a decision I'm making because it makes me feel better, because it makes me feel more free, because it's the opposite of fear, because it makes me feel like I'm bringing some joy, some of what I really care about into this situation. That's the opposite of fear, okay? And then number 2, start to notice this fear cycle everywhere you go, in people interacting in your personal life, people interacting in your business life. Start to see where they are making choices out of fear. It will help you process. And here's the thing, don't go around trying to change them. Don't go around trying to saying like, oh, this decision that decision you made that out of fear. Unless they have hired you as a coach and they want you to tell you that, they're asking for that kind of feedback. It doesn't really work. People don't really respond well to that if you just go pointing it out to them. In my earlier days, and I tried that a little bit. So what you really want to do is act as a model for them, a model of a new way of doing things. Remember, we're tribal. We mirror our tribe. We mirror the people we look up to and the people that are around us. So if you model the behavior that you want to see, other people will start to take on that model. So it all starts with yourself. And those are my tips for you. I hope you enjoyed this overview and this discussion. Thanks so much for being here. And I'll see you on a future webinar. And I hope that you contact me on loveandprofit.com or through DCG Speakers Bureau to hear more about this. I'd love to talk if you're interested in this topic with your organization. Thanks very much.